This is Karen Ramsey, and today is November 5th. November 5th. And we are here with Dr. Benjamin Benulis, and we are going to be talking about a health challenge that many people don't think about because it's not so visible, even though it is getting visible with all of the smaller towers that we're seeing. I'm seeing them here on the highway. And so Dr. Ben and I, we had a talk that we did, and I put it out on my YouTube channel and in my newsletter. So, and then I sent it to all of you. So I think that you may have seen it or probably did see it. And the purpose of this evening is to come with some questions. And Dr. Benjamin, would you like to speak first a little bit about the EMFs and 5G and what you discussed?
Sure, I'll give a brief overview. The main thing is that 5G is the newest generation of wireless. So 4G, which was created before it, was really the wireless infrastructure that made the iPhone possible, allowing you to stream all this data, stream video, things like that. And so now they want to build this new 5G infrastructure, basically on top of the 4G infrastructure, and to get more data, faster download speeds, have everything be hyper connected. And so in order to do that, what they are doing is basically creating these small cell towers that are, instead of 250 feet in the air and a mile away, well, now they're 50 feet in the air and they're every 300 to 500 feet, including directly in front of some people's homes. So you're getting a lot more exposure to radiation, and they're also using a frequency band that's unlike anything else. In the past, they've used lower frequencies, but now they're using a really high frequency, what's called millimeter wave microwave radiation. So that's anything from about 30 gigahertz to about 300. And this type of radiation, this microwave radiation, is actually very harmful to humans and animals and plants, and pretty much it's universally biotoxic. And so the way that we know this is, even though the telecom companies and nobody's really studied the effects of 5G itself, we have studied the effects of microwave radiation as how it affects humans, because it's been researched for almost a century on how to use it as a weapon. So the US military has studied, like, okay, how do we beam these microwaves at enemies and basically fry them with it? And now it just so happens that that same frequency is really good at sharing data wirelessly. Well, we're beaming those same waves at people, and we're beaming them at levels that are definitely harmful to human life based on the data that we have. And we have a lot of data. There's something like 20,000 studies on the effects of microwave radiation on humans. Compare that to something like, plant-based nutrition on humans. We have maybe a few thousand studies, okay? So we have a lot of data to show that's harmful, but it's going up anyway, and there's really no way to opt out. We really have to stop it, because it's not like, if you don't want to eat the standard American diet, you can go to the grocery store, you can buy mangoes, bananas, and celery, right? But if you don't want to get hit by microwave radiation, well, it's just kind of everywhere, and you don't have a choice. So it's pretty urgent that we take action to stop it.
Yeah. Before we go into any questions, can you, I didn't have your bio with me. Can you give us some background on yourself?
Sure. So in a previous life, I actually worked in the semiconductor industry for various telecommunications companies. And so I was a mechanical engineer and worked for companies that developed various technologies that are sort of precursors to 5G, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And so I kind of have a knowing of this kind of stuff, just sort of cursory. And then about 10 years ago, I came down with an autoimmune disease in my late 20s. And after kind of searching for answers, that's when I found raw foods, and I was able to heal myself. And then going on that whole journey, which I'm sure most of y'all have, you kind of realize, yeah, you don't like your priorities and you want to do something different in your life. So I decided to go back to school. Wanted to be someone who, taught people how to live in such a way that they could heal themselves. Became a doctor in chiropractic. So that's what I do now. But when this 5G thing kind of came on the radar, I already had knowledge of what was going on. And when I, really dug into the science, it was pretty alarming. So now I'm speaking out and just trying to get the message out to people.
Wonderful. And I know that you're doing special work in Arizona. Can you tell us, do you have a group in Arizona, and what kind of solutions are you coming up with?
Sure. So we do have a group. It's called Arizona for Safe Technology. And Arizona is kind of the pilot state for the rest of the country. Bill Gates wants to build a smart city here, and a lot of telecom companies are kind of doing their initial build out to use this state as a basically a giant guinea pig. And so we've kind of had to, act fast to try to stop these, but it's not been easy because there are laws that were actually put in the books like 3 years ago that make it really hard for even cities to say no here. There's a state law that says that basically the telecom companies can put them in any public right of way, on any sidewalk, in any park, anywhere on city land, and basically don't even have to ask. They can just go and just build it. And that includes like the sidewalk right in front of your house. So it's very hard to stop the towers. But what we have found is that even though the cities can't say no and prevent the telecom companies from building, what they can do is create an ordinance and say how much power comes out of the towers. So just to give you an idea, you need about 0.02 watts of what's called effective radiating power to make a normal 5-bar call on your phone. Like 0.02 watts will get you 5 bars. Perfect call quality. Okay. These towers are shooting off 1,000 watts, 2,000 watts, 7,000 watts, literally up to 25 million times as much radiation as is needed to make a 5-bar call. So what the cities can do is say, no more than 0.02 or no more than 1 or 0.5, or they cap the power at a certain level so that these basically fire hoses they want to set up every 500 feet just become little squirt guns and aren't nearly as harmful. So that's kind of the strategy we're doing. Other states may not have that law. It's a little easier to stop the tower, but if you're interested in getting involved, you should find a group in your area that's doing it. And the good news and the bad news is if there isn't a group, well, you're kind of tasked with creating one.
Yes. Thank you. That was very informative. It's good to hear those numbers. I don't think that you mentioned them when we were talking, so that's more information.
Sure. Yeah. And I got so much information in my head. I'm always trying to condense it down to like the most digestible, because I could tell you to talk about it for 2 hours and everyone's brain would be fried and they'd be like, well, okay, now what? But I don't want to do that to you guys. So yeah, I'm just here to answer any questions you have about EMFs, about 5G, about the telecom industry, about is anything really. You want to ask me about raw food or what? I'm just here to hang out and answer questions. I do have to go in about 15 minutes, but
okay, so we have time. So let's start with some questions. I have some of my own, but I want you all to have an opportunity. So was that Rick?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Howdy, Doc. So as concise as possible, I've read whole Rethinking the Science of Nutrition by T. Colin Campbell. I just finished his updated version of the China study. I can list more authors. The idea is that what they're saying by the whole food plant-based diet is that really we don't have to be concerned about environmental contaminants, but I think these are compounds that might be in the food or in the air versus radio waves. So they're saying by eating the WFPB, most of these contaminants will be ameliorated by the body, but no one has touched the subject of RF and EMF. You mentioned in your previous interview that there's at least 20,000 studies that we've got from other areas on EMF, but have any of those addressed ameliorating the EMF based on diet or any other way. You hear about people putting on aluminum hats, you know, Faraday cages in their houses and stuff. What can you tell us?
So what's your question exactly?
Yeah. So do any of those studies that you're aware of, if you mentioned there's at least 20,000, do they mention how we can work to prevent ourselves from being irradiated by these signals?
Sure. So good question. And did somehow the Colin Campbell stuff tie into it, or is that?
Yeah, in that the WFPB says that if you're eating that way, then whatever compounds like aflatoxins, which is a mold on peanuts and other compounds, you don't have to worry about those being toxins in the body because the diet helps the body to eliminate those without the danger. But if you're eating meat and dairy, then those toxins are a real problem, right? They can be carcinogenic, etc. So that was kind of the
Okay. Understand the scope of the question now. Okay, cool. And I will say, Whole is one of my absolute favorite books. Because,
Love
you
it.
know, not only does it explain a lot, but it really it sets a paradigm of like a way of thinking. I think someone's got some echo or something. Can you mute yourself?
Yeah, let me, and if somebody has any background noise. Okay, there we go. Thank you.
Okay. So, and yeah, it's super important to set a paradigm. And I think, T. Colin Campbell, he's up there in years. And the toxicity of the food supply and the earth in general is not what it was even 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. And so my theory is kind of that the human organism can withstand a heck of a lot. I mean, you see these people that live to 65 eating a standard American diet. It's like, when you really understand nutrition, you're like, wow, how did the body hang on for that long, you know? So there's a certain amount of toxicity that it can handle on its own. And so the less you expose it to through your food, the easier it can handle what's in the air, what's in the water, what you're exposed to, just like walking on the ground and all that. But there's still a threshold. And so like, that's why it's good to eat organic food, because like you want to give yourself the best shot at like the least amount of toxicity. Obviously you can't like live in a sterile bubble and never expose yourself to toxicity. It's just out of the question. And so I think that EMFs are sort of the word toxicity for EMFs is kind of, it's like, we know it's harmful, right? It's not toxic in the same way that a toxic chemical is toxic, but it causes harm and it's something you're exposed to, even if it's energy and not matter per se. And so, we look at our EMF exposure over time. I mean, Wi-Fi didn't exist in 2002, right? And now it's ubiquitous. So that's something that like you can't account for. How much toxicity is that? But in general, you want to just mitigate exposure. So turning your Wi-Fi off at night, putting your cell phone on airplane mode at night, just not having things emit wireless radiation at you if you can avoid it. Now with 5G, of course, it's going to be ubiquitous. It's going to be everywhere. So you can't, there's no tinfoil hat option. There's no sealing yourself in a hermetic, sarcophagus to avoid it. Like it's going to be there. They have these like, bracelets and necklaces that you supposedly can wear and it bounces off of you. I haven't seen any signs that any of that works. And so people get really upset with me. They're like, oh, well, I found this pendant online. It's only $129 and it blocks all EMFs. Like, I don't think so. But they want to believe in like things having magical powers. And the hard truth of the matter is that it doesn't. And if this goes up, the only way to avoid it is to work with your government to get rid of it, or somehow cap the power or limit it. That's really your only option. There's, or move to some remote part of the world where it just doesn't exist, which isn't an option for most people. They don't want to do that option. So like, you got to get involved, you got to get active. I wish there was an easier solution, or I can make a lot of money coming on this call and just telling you everybody buy my magic necklace for $500, right? But I got to tell you the truth. The truth is that like, you got to get politically active to stop the stuff. That's really your only option.
Great, thank you. I just, while you're saying this, I'm just thinking my son moved to Costa Rica and he's bought his land and he's growing his own fruit trees and his vegetable gardens. He wants to become sustainable and he doesn't want Wi-Fi on his property. So he's getting fiber optic.
Hmm.
And I think we had talked a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Can
So
you?
fiber optic is the safe solution. Instead of beaming the internet down on everybody, just send it underground through a wire where it doesn't give off radiation. I mean, you got to dig in the ground and, you know, there's consequences of that, but I mean, they're really not that much compared to like dosing everybody with radiation. So fiber is the safe solution. We look like a city like Chattanooga, Tennessee, 10 years ago, just decided that they were going to do fiber for everybody. And now they have the fastest internet. It's way faster than anything 5G can do. And it's like literally like homeless people can go to the library and use like ultra fast internet for free. I mean, because of what they did, they were smart about it.
Yeah.
So fiber is definitely like, yeah, the solution. If was his name Marco?
Yeah.
Yeah. I got to get his number. I got to get out there and join him and do what he's doing.
Yeah. Yeah, fiber optic, I think, is definitely the way to go. So, anybody else?
Yes. So first of all, thank you, Dr. Benulis. I'm really happy that you can join us. Actually, I want to share with you that my path is very similar to yours. I used to work in the telecommunication industry, actually in Tempe, Arizona for Motorola.
Oh, okay.
Yes, as a cell phone design. Well, not this was before that, but I also work at Nokia too. And so I tested cell phone, and I shared with the group last time that I totally believe that the impact on a human health, because I remember after coming back from work every day, when I actually do go into the lab to test the cell phones, I have headaches every night coming back. But I was working on the user interface side, so I didn't have to expose to that day in, day out, and be like some of my colleagues who got brain cancers and all that. So this is really real to me, that 5G, the impact on our health. So I'm no doubt about it. And I also, on my journey, also I changed my career, leave high tech and become acupuncturist.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Also still going towards, natural health, and also became vegan myself, because what I see in my clients and also my own personal experience, that really going towards whole food health, plant-based is the way to go to protect our health, our own health, not only for the planet's health. So I applaud your.
Lisa, do you have a question for him?
Yes, I do. I just want to lead to it that do you can you say a little more about how the 5G levels, the radiation level, how it compared to the level that it was being used in China, in Wuhan, where it actually started the first 5G testing in the whole world was in Wuhan at the same time as COVID-19 started. And at the time when we see on the video reporting that people were dropping dead on the street because they're due to the oxygenation effect of whether it's the virus or the 5G radiation in the environment. Can you speak a little bit about that?
I'll speak a little bit about that, but I'm sure the cops will come knock down the door and drag me away in about 60 seconds. No, I'm kidding. So great question, Lisa. And I actually have a question for you before I answer your question, because I think everybody can learn a lot from what you just said. But you worked at Motorola where you tested things.
Yes.
Now, when you say tested, I'm curious what you tested, because a lot of people think, oh, she must have tested if it was safe for humans to be exposed to it. But what I'm guessing you tested was just to see if it worked, right?
Yeah, it was not. So absolutely, there's no safety testing for EMF, no organized testing. the testing I did was because I was in the user interface design of the phone. We tested the calling in and out, the signals and all, but not on how much impacts human health. But it's what I share with you is my personal experience after being in the environment of the building, even full of the radiation, and have phone next to my ear 8 hours a day doing testing. I come home every day with headache and foggy brain and all those symptoms that is being talked about in studies, in the 20,000 studies you mentioned.
Sure. So
Yeah.
thanks for explaining that, because I think a lot of people just assume that like these companies, like, oh, well, scientists and really smart people are working on it. They if it was harmful, they would know and they would tell us. But you're basically saying, no, we never checked for that. And like, I got all these health problems and so did other people. And it was just kind of par for the course.
Yeah. And also mentioning that is actually, and after 2 years working in the industry, because I worked for both Motorola and Nokia, and at the end of the 2 years, I developed, all of a sudden one day I woke up with a golf ball size lump in my neck, which I had to surgically remove it after I had a biopsy and proving that it wasn't cancer. But that lump, just pop out overnight. I'm sure it's accumulative due to what I was exposed to and the stress level that I worked under. That's one of my determinant that I quit my career, my industry.
And that was the side where you held the phone.
The left side. It was the left side. So I hold the phone on both sides with doing testing. So I can't tell, which side is what, because I use the phone way more than normal people because I was doing testing. So, but I know now that I'm a healthcare provider, this is what I teach my clients to be aware of these impacts. So but one thing that that nobody talks about in the media and also healthcare providers doesn't make the connection between 5G and COVID-19 is the biggest thing, pink elephant in the world, that there's nobody talking about the connection. But I do see the connection. The fact that the time that COVID-19 starts and at where Wuhan is a city is exactly where the city where 5G is rolling out the first in the whole world, and all those radiations that the people in Wuhan was exposed to, and how people was dropping dead, not drop dead, but drop into passing out and short of breath and out of because of its lack of oxygen going to the brain, because the 60 megahertz of the 5G actually affects the oxygenation in our blood. That's why it stops the oxygen going to the brain, and people who are not very heart strong already, they will be susceptible to this kind of stopping of the oxygen flow.
Sure.
But what I want to know is what the level of the radiation, is that comparable to Wuhan in China, and whether the cell phone companies are increasing up those levels, and to a certain level at 60 megahertz is the equivalent to the microwave oven, same frequency level. So if we get to that part, that is equivalent to we living inside a microwave oven with the door open and radiating 24/7.
Sure. So great question. This is something that, I definitely want to answer, but I wanted to hear kind of more of your story, and I thought it would be valuable for everybody to hear.
Thank you.
So so what we do know is, and this is like a touchy subject, and I want to, approach it in a scientifically sound way that makes sense to everybody. So what we do know, so I can't answer your question as far as what was the intensity of what was going on, as far as how much 5G radiation was getting, shot out in Wuhan when the height of the pandemic was there. But it is true that Wuhan was coincidentally like the pilot city for the world for 5G. Very strange that it's also the pilot city for this new virus. And, it is a coincidence. Like the two things literally happen coincidentally. So it's, can you blame anybody? Maybe
Not the same. Right? It's not the only coincidence. I mean, the first case of U.S. Deaths of COVID-19 is also in the same hospital in Washington D.C. Not Washington D.C. Washington State, and in the same hospital where they install 5G and doing testing.
Yeah. So the question really then is, okay, well, what is the scientific basis for that? COVID-19 has this whole, shortness of breath, inability to get oxygen, cascade that happens. And what they would do, you guys probably heard about this, that people with COVID, well, they would see their oxygen saturation levels in their blood drop below a certain level and think, okay, this person's getting not getting enough oxygen, so we're going to intubate them, which is basically they take a tube, they shove it down their throat, and they force air into their lungs, okay, to try to get them air. But here's the problem. They weren't experiencing a traditional respiration problem. The problem wasn't that they couldn't get air in their lungs. The problem was that they couldn't get air from the lungs to the brain, to the muscles, to the organs, out through the blood, to the tissues. Okay, this is a process called cellular respiration, wherein the red blood cells and hemoglobin get oxygen from the lungs and they carry it through the arteries to every cell and organ and muscle and tissue and gland in your brain, everything in the body. All right, and somewhere along the line, this process was breaking down. And so they could jam oxygen in your lungs all day. But if the blood can't carry the oxygen to your brain, you're host. And they have no way of, there really aren't limited ways to fix that. And this is why they said, well, it seems like altitude sickness. It's like the people with altitude sickness, there's basically not enough pressure to get air into the lungs anyway, and to perfuse the oxygen through the bloodstream. But in this case, you just basically can't get oxygen from the lungs to the body. Well, it so happens, and we have evidence to show that exposure to microwave radiation does all kinds of crazy things to red blood cells, the little transport buggies that are supposed to get the oxygen in the cells. They take on weird spiky shapes. They clump up. They form these like long, look like a roll of coins, where they're just like, because a red blood cell kind of looks like a coin, like a pancake, and pancakes attached to each other, and then they get all globby, and they can't transport oxygen as well. So we see that, especially at this 60 gigahertz frequency, that you can literally take people's breath away. Like they literally can't transport the oxygen. And with microwaves, you can essentially cause a symptom that is identical to what COVID-19 allegedly causes. So there's another just very convenient coincidence going on. So that's what I want to impart on you, is that both the microwaves and the COVID-19, as far as we know definite on the microwave radiation. I don't know if we know for sure on the COVID-19, inhibit that cellular respiration. So it's like, okay, well, we're cutting off your oxygen on the front end with the mask, and then we're cutting it off on the back end through the microwaves. It's like 2020 has become like the year of the war on breathing. I can't breathe. That was really weird that happened too, right? So again, I'm just presenting the evidence, and you can make your own decision, but that's a great question. And by the way, my other thing got rescheduled, so I have more time to talk.
Oh,
So,
good.
Yeah.
Good. I was like trying to, I totally value your story, Lisa. And it's really exciting to me that we have Dr. Ben here and that you also have that experience. And I think it's also something that we as health coaches really need to be aware of, going out into the world, and people coming to us with all kinds of health challenges. Some of these things that we're talking about we're going to be in front of. And if we're not yet, we're going to be in front of them very soon.
Karen, one thing I want to point out, coincidentally, best way to increase or improve cellular respiration, low-fat, whole food, plant-based diet.
Yay. Another reason why I was glad to have a plant-based doctor come.
Yeah.
Yes.
I am having somebody come next week because I wanted to do a couple of sessions on this. I'm having somebody come next week from the military.
Okay, wow.
Great.
And
Great.
Dr. Ben, if you're around and you want to come, we'd love to have you.
Okay.
You might want to even connect with this man.
Yeah.
It sounds fascinating. He's not plant-based, but he's certainly health conscious, and he was asking me a lot of questions about nutrition, and I think he's got like another piece of the puzzle. So I don't know what you said that we can solve it, but we can certainly start to work at protecting our communities in some ways. Lisa?
Yeah, one more question, Dr. Benulis. So since we are working with people with their nutrition, do you know of any specific type of foods that are helpful in preventing or protecting radiation? Like I know hydrogen water, for example, the Japanese have studies that the molecular hydrogen protects the cells from radiation.
Not that I'm aware of. And I think, like I said, you know, to improve cellular respiration, a whole food plant-based diet. I mean, it's there's not like a specific fruit or vegetable or like, you know, cranberries are better than raspberries. It's whole plant food, stuff that grows out of the ground and off of a tree.
Just the whole spectrum, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Great. Okay, any more questions?
Yeah.
We have a question from Rick. He says, what is the definitive book on EMF dangers? There's a book called The Invisible Rainbow by, I just read it and I can't remember the guy's name. I want to, let's just Google really quick. Invisible Rainbow.
There's also one, I recently heard a man speak, and it was a fantastic talk on EMFs, and I'm like a quarter of the way through his book. It's called Radiation Nation.
Oh, yeah.
I have the book in my bedroom. I can run and get it if you want to know the author, but I think you could probably just Google it.
What I like about The Invisible Rainbow is that he takes you through the entire history of EMFs from when they were originally doing radio waves, and how each new technology that came out had this like these coincidental health problems that came with it, that it would affect people. Like the 1918 influenza outbreak is believed to have a correlation with like the widespread of radio waves. And so like the Hong Kong flu of 1969 was like when FM radio became like a widespread thing. So yeah, I found that book is like a really good jumping off point, because it really explains not just 5G, but the whole history of radiation exposure of humans and the health things that have happened coincidentally with those.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Any more questions? Linda?
Karen, I have a question. Doctor, do you know why they went so much, why they increased the radiation or whatever you were describing before from 0.2 to whatever? Do you know why they did that, made that huge jump? That doesn't seem to make sense. Like, why would they do that? If it, you know what I mean?
To be able to send a lot more data, because now
From what the way you expressed it, it seems that it's a very large jump. And were they making those kinds of degrees of jump 4 from one generation to the other, or is it from 4 to 5, like a very large jump? Or do you know?
Yeah, 4 to 5 is a pretty large jump. I mean, basically, if if you want to, I mean, I don't know if it's a linear thing or it's like if you want to be able to download 10 times faster, you have to shoot out 10 times more radiation. But they really want to have internet connectivity where they have something called an Internet of Things,
Yes.
where all these devices can communicate with each other over the grid, in addition to just like your cell phone. So they want to be able to like have an information super duper highway where it's not just your cell phone and everybody else's cell phone. It's thousands, millions of devices are all communicating wirelessly at all times. And so to be able to have enough bandwidth to do that, you got to shoot a lot of radiation, unfortunately. So it begs the question, like, why, instead of shooting a bunch of radiation at everybody, why don't we just put really thick wires underground? They're called fiber optic, and we can do the same thing without hurting people,
Well, the driverless cars also rely on 5G to be able to do the driving the cars.
And what about the electric cars?
Yeah, I mean, that is the plan with these smart cities where they want to have just like fully automated cars. Funny enough, Tempe, Arizona was a pilot spot for driverless cars. They killed 2 people in the experiment.
So the technology is not.
But yeah, I mean, it would be nice to have driverless cars, but as long as it's safe, right? I mean, that's the main thing, is that we want all this technology, and there's so much money to be made. It's like everybody's willing to just sweep the safety stuff under the rug so they can make the money. And that's basically the problem.
I have another question.
Sure.
I read somewhere else today on the internet from an author that I am familiar with. She says, and I think you say as well, that this has not been tested. Or in the movie, I think I heard that this has not been tested. Or I don't know if all the Gs before this have been tested, but 5G supposedly has not been tested. And this doesn't seem right to me, that this is being rolled out without being tested. Yeah, it's like a little
Sure.
nutty.
So, and I was talking about this with Lisa, right? Like, they test it, but they just test to see if the cell phone can make calls and send data. They've never tested whether it hurts people. I worked at telecom in the industry for 10 years. We never tested to see, oh, does this harm people? It was not even an idea that we had. It was just like, it works. Put it out there. Like drug companies, food companies, they have to test if their stuff's harmful. But the telecom, it's never really been an issue or something that people have thought of. And it's really hard to put new regulations on an industry. So none of the Gs have been safety tested. The FCC created guidelines, which are not even binding. And so there's really no regulation is the problem. And the industry's taken advantage of that. So yes, they literally have not tested it, and they never have, and they've never needed to, and no one's ever asked them to. So it's just sort of, we operate on the assumption that it hasn't been tested for so long, well, it must be safe.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty foolish assumption, but when there's a lot of, trillions of dollars in the line, corners get cut.
And I think that we as the public assume that it has been tested for safety, not for whether it works. It's supposed to work, otherwise, you can't sell it. But I'm, if I mention this to other people, they don't really want to hear it. So I think people are under the assumption that if something is being given to us or sold to us, that it's been tested for safety. I think in general, in general, I'm assuming that, in general, like if, until I was hearing all this stuff about 5G lately, I saw that it was coming out, but I didn't think, oh, we're going to have a problem with this with health. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people just trust corporations and the government, and you know, we know that a lot of government agencies have basically been captured by the very industry they're supposed to regulate. You know, as you know, in the plant-based world, we know that like the FDA and the USDA has been captured by big ag. They just put out information that says meat and dairy are healthy, eat it. The FDA says, oh yeah, statin drugs, cholesterol medications, metformin, diabetes, like just take all the drugs for it. Like diet can't do anything. And so it's the drug companies that are running the FDA. And I don't know if you guys know this, but one of the ways the FDA makes money is they fast track approval of drugs. And so they get like 70% of their funding from fast tracking drugs. So literally the drug companies pay them more money to get their drugs approved faster. And that's how the FDA makes most of their money. So if they didn't fast track drugs, they wouldn't have enough money to do what they do. Well, the same thing is happening in the telecom industry. Donald Trump appointed this guy named Ajit Pai as the chairman of the FCC. He was a former Verizon lobbyist. He was a lawyer for Verizon. And he actually made a video like joking about how did a Verizon lobbyist get appointed the head of the FCC? Ha 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 ha, look at me. So that's the level of corruption that we're dealing with. And it's like people can see the corruption when it comes to certain things, but then they just assume that if it's somehow providing some benefit, like, oh, I can download Pokemon faster on my iPhone. Well, it must be a good thing. How could it possibly be bad? It's very short-sighted to assume that just because something has benefits doesn't mean that it has downsides too. But you know, that's where we're at, and you know, people are inundated with a lot of information, and it's hard to keep up. And they got, you know, in 2020, they got 10 other crises going on, and they got a limited attention span. And so those of us who are, you know, who are knowledgeable have got to spread the word, and it'll fall on a lot of deaf ears. But you know, here tonight we're talking with a bunch of people who are, you know, interested and want to get involved. So you know, you can't, like these people, you can't preach to them, you can't waste your time with them. I mean, the government has a pretty bad track record of protecting our health and safety when it comes to like asbestos, tobacco, vaccines, GMOs, all this stuff. So it's like, I don't really have much faith that they're probably going to do a worse job now than they did 10 years ago. So I don't know.
Yeah, totally. Anybody else
Well,
questions?
Well,
Michelle.
as an ex-employee for telecommunications, also for AT&T.
I didn't know.
Yeah, so we used to work with the routing protocols, and it's all about moving data quickly. I was part of that when they were doing the magnetic waves. And it's amazing, like you was just stating about the fiber optic cable, you know, that runs underground. We used to get a lot of calls in, you know, and you know, it takes up a lot of space. And we used to have to send the guys out there, and they come to find out it was bitten by a rat. So there was a controversy on whether or not they should do things up in the air or down underneath the ground. At that time, like Lisa, I mean, we were working very, very routing. Everything was routing protocol for us. Engineering on the 7 layers of the computer that people don't see. They just see the application level, like what we're looking at right now. They don't understand that there's presentation, session, network, routing, and all of that stuff that goes underneath it. So she pointed out something in Weehong about the respiratory system being affected by the 5G. Am I correct? So now I'm thinking in my little mind, because I was sort of late on the call, are we saying that there's a correlation between COVID-19 and 5G? Are we speaking about that? Only because I was a little late, and I heard what Lisa was saying, and I heard what the doctor was saying about the Benjamin, right?
Yeah.
So now I'm wondering, what can we do I know he said go to the plant-based diet, and this is what we should teach people, but this thing seems to be very huge. You know, this is a big concern, and I think that we have to find a way to get it out. I know for sure the Food and Drug Administration doesn't work on our healthy people's behalf. They work with the pharmaceutical world. We learned that, Karen, in our first school. So, I mean, is there a coalition out there that we can join to stop this? Because we're going to get off the phone and going to say, where we're going to go from here. This is a big concern.
Groups, right, Dr. Ben? That's what we have to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, so I'll put some links to stuff in the chat. But to answer your question, yes, there is overlap between symptoms caused by exposure to microwave radiation and symptoms attributable to COVID-19, especially around the whole respiratory thing. Like, they seem to cause the same thing. So is there a link? I don't know, but it's awfully strange that, you know, this is going on.
I like what, excuse me, I like what Lisa was stating. And she hit it on the nail, because there was a lot of, like she said, people were dying in one home, right? And, you know, and rapidly. My question is, when we understand that they were doing testing at the time there. So now, and then it moved on to Iran and Italy. So I'm thinking, if they were doing testing in those places at that time, then we could say that there is a correlation between the two. We just have to find that out.
Yeah, definitely a correlation. You know, it is suspicious. Can we prove any kind of cause, or that, you know, there is no virus and it's all just caused by radiation? Don't really have the data to say. I'm certainly suspicious. But even that, all that aside, we have the 20,000 studies to show that this stuff is bad news. We have people that are doing things like suing the FCC, suing the telecom industry, but these things take a long time to move the battleship at like the really high level, the national, international level. So what you want to do is you want to get involved at the local and state level, or provincial level, or wherever you are in the world. And so you can meet with your city council, and you can get them to either just call a moratorium on 5G towers. You present them the science, you speak at the city council meeting, or you get them to write some kind of wireless ordinance where they cap the power at a certain level, so that at least, even if the towers go up, they're not hurting people. And I kind of think that's the better option, because you basically cut the telecom industry off the knees, this tactic, right? Because they're going to spend all this money on this infrastructure and like building it all out, and thinking they can shoot, you know, 1,000, 2,000, 7,000 watts at people. And it's like, no more than 0.05 watts in this town, mister. And then they've invested all this money in a fire hose that you turn into a squirt gun, and they're kind of left holding the bag. Whereas if they never got to build the tower, well, they would have saved the money. But I think both options are good, and you kind of got to do what works in your jurisdiction, or whatever your local government people will listen to.
Right.
But
go ahead.
No, who's calling me? Okay. Basically, yeah, I'll put some links in the chat. There's a website called Scientists for Wired Tech, which basically explains, like, it's got a ton of information on this website. You could spend a whole weekend just like reading everything. MyStreet, MyChoice.com. Yeah, these two websites will teach you everything you need to know about how to get involved at the municipal and state levels to stop it where you live. That's the most important thing. And then, of course, getting a coalition of like-minded people, because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
It is
of work. I can't stress that enough. You get more people, you organize, you get a group going, you assign tasks, and you divide up the work equitably, so that, because it's like, it could be the job of like 3 full-time people to stop it in one town.
Well, I noticed, Dr. Benjamin, if you ride through Bergen County, they have their very wealthy areas like Upper Saddle River, Woodcliff Lake, that sort of thing. If you ride there, you notice that when you're on the phone, you normally, it's a drop call. So I know that there is no electromagnetic waves or cell towers in the air, in that area. So that means that community got together and said, we don't want it. It's because you can be driving and talking, and all of a sudden it's boom. And I know that's the reason, because I learned that as being an engineer. So now we can get what you're just stating in our own community to happen, that we don't want these 5Gs coming in our area, and we want to do to slow down the process of the electromagnetic waves or cell towers in our area. Then as a community, that may work as well. We've got so many you know, women that are, it's just crazy. You know, I really think autism comes from that too. And it's just so sad. Why can't we just go through the walkie-talkies like you talk to me with a string?
I agree. And actually, you bring up a good point with autism. And Karen, I didn't talk about this much when we had a call, but this is a really important point. Because is there a correlation with radiation exposure and autism? Yes.
Oh,
And
sure.
so here's what we think is going on mechanistically, is that with exposure to EMFs, we've done studies in rats that show that they've actually exposed rats to radiation, then autopsied their brain, and found that the radiation actually opens up what's called the blood-brain barrier. This is basically a permeable barrier within the brain that selectively lets some things that are flowing in from the blood into the brain, and other things it keeps it out. And so it keeps out things like heavy metals, aluminum, mercury, stuff like that, which, you know, if children are exposed to vaccines, and, you know, flu vaccine has mercury, a lot of these, almost all the vaccines have aluminum in them. These are heavy metals, toxins that are in there. Normally the brain won't let them in, but if they're exposed to EMFs, well, boom, it's getting in there. And we've seen with autism and a number of neurodegenerative issues like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, that when we autopsy these people's brains, there's aluminum and mercury in the brains of these people with severe, like really high levels of it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
EMFs are kind of aiding and abetting the toxic heavy metals that we're kind of already getting exposed to from getting into the brain.
And then also I've read that at a certain point, and I mean, it's a little different for each person, but at a certain point, the left and the right hemispheres actually close. And any heavy metals that were stuck in the midline, there's very little chance of getting them out.
Wow.
And so when we get involved politically, understand that all the politicians have been sold a bill of goods that, like, this is great, it's going to create jobs, it's going to be great for education, all these kids are going to get high-speed internet, the telecom companies pay us so much money to build these things on school property. And so they've been sold a bill of goods that 5G is like the greatest thing for like education and jobs and connectivity. And that would be true if it weren't harmful. So it really is going to take some work to basically get to show them that, like, hey, you've been sold a bill of goods by the industry and it's not as good as you think. Here are the downsides. So just understand that it's not going to, like, people, you're not going to walk in and they go, oh, I had no idea. They were basically fed a line from the industry that there's really no harm to worry about, and it's going to jobs and education, and it's going to be like, you know, the next savior of everything. Which of course any company is going to say that about their product. So just know when you start speaking out against it, that's the kind of thing you're going to run into.
Thank you. Any more questions? Lori? Can't hear you.
Hi.
Okay.
Hi, Dr. Ben. Thanks for all the information. I guess I watched the interview that you had with Karen, and I understand you have to put together educational materials to go before your city council, and you do, you know, when I talk about this with other people, they want proof. And I know these websites you provided have tons of information and lawsuits, but if you're talking to somebody and you only had a few minutes, do you have like one profound fact or case or mention of proof that you mentioned that really gets their attention to change their mind? You know, anything that, like, do you have a favorite or a very, you know, a case that stays in your mind about proof of all these sicknesses that the radiation causes?
Sure. So it's kind of a catch-22, right? Because people are like, well, I want proof. And then you show them one study and they go, oh, well, that's just one study. And then you give them a bunch of studies and they go, I don't have time to read through all this. So, you know, it's like the people that are going to want to be receptive are going to want to be receptive. And the people that want to keep, you know, the wool over their eyes are gonna. What I do have, and I'll send it to Karen and she can forward it to the rest of you, but it's basically, it's a 2-page Word doc and all it is links to studies. And it's military studies. Did I send that to you already?
Yes. I have
Yeah,
it. I'll send it to everybody.
if people are really as scientific minded as they say, which like in this day and age, it's like it's gone out the window. People say things like, well, I believe in science, which is like basically saying science is the religion that they prescribe to. Science is a method for testing an hypothesis. So you can show them the science, and if they're actually willing to read it, they might learn something. But a lot of people aren't, and they just have to understand that, like, you know, like some people just aren't going to be convinced. In fact, there was a really funny video someone made. If you want to look this up, it's called "No Amount of Evidence Will Ever Persuade an Idiot." It's a 5-minute YouTube video about 5G. Hold on, I have to find it because it's
No amount of evidence
Ever persuade an idiot.
will ever persuade an idiot.
I just found it. Yes. But basically this idea that, like, you know, you can show people the best data in the world and they'll still come up with some kind of reason that they don't want to believe you, right? But people that are actually scientific and objective, it's pretty clear. But yeah, you can't convince everybody. Just like being vegan is like a pretty simple concept, right? Like it's like you don't harm animals, you eat stuff that grows out of the ground in its natural state, and it's good for your health, and it's good for the animals, and it's good for the planet. And people still say things, but like, oh, our ancestors ate meat, or like, where are you gonna get your calcium? You know, it's like you present all the data in the world. Some people are just gonna resist it because it shatters their paradigm too much.
I just did a video today on where vegans get their calcium and talked about exactly this.
Yeah, funny enough, I got asked to speak at someone's like women entrepreneurs meeting, and they're like, "Can you speak about osteoporosis? Like most of us have it." Like, ooh, that's a conversation we need to have. That shouldn't be.
Exactly.
It's like most of us have arthritis too. This may not be in pain, it's like dormant.
Dr. Benulis, do you know anything about the level of EMF that the baby monitors have, whether they are damaging to the baby brains?
I don't know that topic specifically, but I mean, children, especially small children, are the most vulnerable because their bodies are more water, they have thinner bones. So there's a potential that it could be. I mean, there's even people looking into saying, okay, well, is ultrasounding these fetuses to look at them, is that a good idea? Because no one's ever really studied that.
Those are rapidly developing cells that are, the genes are opening to reproduce additional cells for them to grow. So very, very much more susceptible to radiation.
Yeah, I would think so. I know a woman who's a midwife by profession, and she wrote several books about the danger of ultrasound for growing fetuses, and want to tell women, pregnant women, to be aware of that, so they
Is
know
that
what.
Nancy Weiner?
Hmm?
Is that Nancy Weiner?
No, I think her name is Janice. I forgot her last name.
Okay.
I can share with
Nancy
you. Yeah.
Weiner here in the Boston area. She writes books about that.
Yeah. So that leads me to think and in that movie, Generation Z also mentioned about baby monitors.
Yes.
How that is, really bad for the infants.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and now with this Internet of Things, they want to have, the home interconnected. So it's like you got the baby monitor, they have these things called smart diapers. Did I talk about that with you, Karen?
Oh yeah.
I think you did mention that. Yes.
Yeah. So it's just like, all these devices to better monitor the safety of your baby. Meanwhile, they're getting a more and more of exposure to EMFs. One thing that I learned actually in between now and when we talked, toxic mold exposure has become a huge problem in the past 10, 20 years, right? Like it didn't used to happen that all these people had these like weird illnesses from exposure to mold. Turns out toxic mold, they did this lab experiment where they basically grew the mold in a petri dish, and when they exposed it to more to basically Wi-Fi, that it gave off like astronomically more spores. So people never really had toxic mold problems before because the EMFs were like basically shocking the mold into shooting out more toxin. But that's kind of an unforeseen consequence of what we, what we've been doing.
Wow. So many new things showing up. Does anybody else have any questions?
I just have one more question. Is there another city besides like Chattanooga, Tennessee that was successful? I know in the interview you also mentioned Belgium is rejecting 5G, but what other towns, cities, countries were successful in fighting 5G?
Sure, great question. Because it's important, especially when you go to your city government and you're like, well, look, Chattanooga, Tennessee did it, or what have you. So Chattanooga didn't quite fully fight 5G, but what they did do was they got such a good wired infrastructure that there's not going to be a lot of build out there. Like they're still going to get it probably, but just not what most cities are going to get. Petaluma, California is one that they fought it like tooth and nail. They've been doing it for years. They're like a really good example. So Petaluma is a city that's about maybe like an hour north of San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And then
there's a town in West Virginia that will not permit it. And they don't have EMFs in their town. They are a completely like EMF free town. I forgot the name of it. My friend wants to take me there because she's very much involved with the EMFs, and she's leaving the place where she lives in Florida because she did some research, and there's like 31 cell towers in just like a couple of towns. And so she's selling her house and leaving and going more to Central Florida where there's less. And she told me about this place in West Virginia, something Greenwood, Green Lake.
Haven't heard of it. If you go on Scientists for Wired Tech, they have a lot of examples of what other cities have done and where they've been successful. So that's a really good resource.
Great. Anybody else?
I wanted to know more about that mold stuff. Like, so you're saying that the mold increases, like the harm from the EMFs increases with the mold, or however you were saying. Because I have mold and autistic son, and severely autistic, and we're having a lot of issues, and then the mold, and so I'm definitely interested in that.
Somebody needs to mute themselves.
Now, for the last year, his family and his friends.
So you know what? Okay, great.
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me clarify. And if you want to talk more about your son and autism, I have a few other things you might want to explore. We could talk offline. You can get my info from Karen. But basically, so mold is not a new phenomenon, right? Like mold's been around before humans have. It's been around for gajillions of years. But in the last 10 to 20 years, we've seen this shocking increase of all these people who get mold toxicity and get all these crazy like autoimmune and health problems, respiratory problems, skin problems, all this stuff. It turns out to be mold exposure. And then children with autism, their symptoms magnify when they're exposed to toxic mold. Well, the mold's always been around, but what hasn't been around is the EMFs and the Wi-Fi. And so when you have a house that's getting pelted with these EMFs or the Wi-Fi in the house, the mold hates the Wi-Fi too, just like you. And so as a response, as some sort of like call for help, it just shoots out more spores. And so its effect, like it basically like turns regular mold into like super killer mold. So, we've created a monster with this stuff. So I hope that explains it, that basically the EMFs shock the mold into shooting out more spores. So it's like, oh my God, we're being attacked. I don't want to die. I'm going to shoot out more spores so I can replicate myself. And so you just get more mold.
Dr. Ben, do you have I have a book on autism coming out soon, and it's with a publisher right now. And I'm just thinking I might add, I have a section on EMFs, But I may like to add a section on mold. I think this would be really important for people to know. Do you have any good resources on that? I mean, I can look it up, but do you have any off the top of your head?
I'm definitely not a mold expert,
Okay.
so no.
All right.
We'll
I
dig
would
up
say
a study
David,
that
sorry.
EMFs like exacerbate the mold problem. But as far as how mold causes, I don't know too much about it. It's not my area of expertise.
Okay.
Dr. Campbell talks about the aflatoxin mold in his both of those books, the China Study and in Whole, Rethinking the Science of Nutrition.
Right. I think that mold is a little different though than the mold that you would find in your house.
Understood.
Karen, I know David Asprey does a lot on mold, and he was also talking about autism. That's where I got like glutathione. It was something to use, and also activated charcoal. I mean, I use that Takasumi I was telling you about. Basically, that was a protocol for mold, but also it looked like it was also helpful for autism. So
Glutathione, and what else did you use?
Glutathione, and I'm using Takasumi Supreme, which is activated bamboo, but they suggest activated charcoal, like coconut. Anyway, I would look into him as far as asking about that.
Thank you, Rachel.
Also, get the autistic kids under chiropractic care. I have not like recovered anybody, but I've gotten nonverbal kids to say words and things like that, and definitely seen improvements getting them under chiropractic care.
We were using that brain balance program through chiropractic, but his behavior is just too severe to get him in there.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I understand that can happen. Yeah, they just don't want to lie still or anything like that. Yeah.
Well, he's 22, and his behavior is just difficult to get him out. Is all.
Sure.
Yeah, but thank you. I appreciate all that.
What was the title, Dr. Ben?
What was the what?
What was the title of that book? Autism Chiropractic?
Oh, no, I didn't say it was a book. I just said for autistic kids, getting them under chiropractic care helps a lot.
I see. Thank you.
Rick is also a chiropractor.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
I don't have a question, but I want to thank Dr. Benulis for talking about your idea about the 5G turn mold into super mold. I think that may be applied to the same microbes inside our body. The bad microbes inside our body could turn to superbugs. That may explain for the infections of COVID-19, whether it's whatever the bugs in the body could become superbugs in the presence of 5G.
So I hadn't thought of that, but certainly plausible. Like we don't, there's a bunch of implications that nobody could have foreseen with a technology like this. So we're just kind of finding them as we find them,
So thank you for that.
I also wanted to say that there are some things you can do within your own home. I wanted to ask you about this, Dr. Ben. I just got a 70-foot cable, Ethernet cable, and I can plug this into my router, turn off my Wi-Fi, and then get an adapter to plug into my computer.
It's funny, you used to be able to do that without an adapter, but that's how we got the internet in 2001, everybody did. So yeah, definitely recommend if you can get rid of Wi-Fi and just do as much as you can wired connection. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Amazon, very cheap, $20-something.
Probably find it on OfferUp even cheaper. People are trying to get rid of it. Used to be ubiquitous, and then it became on OfferUp or Craigslist or whatever. People are selling Ethernet cables.
Yeah, they don't want them anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we don't have any more questions, anybody who didn't ask yet have a question?
I wonder, can you hear me?
Yes, Rosa, we can hear you.
Okay, I wonder how the 5G can affect the vegetation and the food source?
So it's definitely harmful to plants. So radiation kills plants just as well as it kills animals. We're seeing in Arizona, there's a specific type of cactus. It's called a saguaro cactus. It's like the iconic, when you think of a cactus, you probably think of a saguaro. It's like the iconic Arizona cactus. And it only grows in Phoenix and Tucson and kind of nearby, and that's it. And it's like heavily environmentally protected. Like if you kill one of these cacti, it's like a $5,000 fine, it's jail time. It's like they work really hard to conserve them. And the agency that works so hard to conserve them has put out an alert and say a bunch of them are dying and we don't know why. Okay, they get these like black patches on them, which are like right in line with where the microwaves hit, and it's killing plants. So yeah, it's definitely like, you know, a wide spectrum, biocide. It kills everything. Yeah, definitely including plants.
Wow.
So we need to protect also our food source.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, now there's talk of like, you know, these smart farms where they're going to have like all the farming is done by these like smart robots that go around and they, you know, whether it's animals or plants, they're going to have this interconnected farm. So now we're going to radiate all the food while we're growing it. It's absurdity. So I'm thinking I'm going to book a ticket to Costa Rica and just bunk with.
Yeah, we're going to start a community down there.
Let's all go. I want to go.
Join us down there.
Yes.
Join us. So, well, thank you so much, Dr. Ben. This was really so informative. We talked about things that I have not realized. Even outside of the interview that I already did with you, we got even more than that. So, so this was fantastic. And I know that you have a website. People can connect with you.
Oh yeah, best way to connect with me is probably on Instagram. It's just my name, so I'll put that in the chat. Yeah, that's probably the best way to get a hold of me if you want to talk. Have any questions, like feel free to reach out. I'll put my email in the chat too. That's my email. And
I just want to, you know, say thank you for being so courageous at a time where so many people don't believe. Like, you've really put yourself out there. One of the main reasons that I got in touch with you is because I saw one of your videos on Instagram and I was like, wow, I have to get in touch with him, you know. And I had already known you from the plant-based movement. So I was like, yes, plant-based physician talking about EMFs and 5G. So
I mean,
really appreciate you coming to speak to us.
Yeah, it's getting built out now. The time to act is now. Don't be on the fence. I know there's a lot of social pressure to conform and go along with everything that's going on with the lockdowns and COVID. And you know, I'm sure everybody on here, you know, in your heart from day one, you knew something wasn't right, but you saw the peer pressure to conform and agree and you know, wear a mask and all this stuff. And you probably knew that like it didn't add up. But we need people speaking up and speaking out, because there's a lot of people on the fence who are just kind of watching. They know it doesn't add up. They know it doesn't make sense. They know something fishy's going down, but they're, by peer pressure and societal pressure, they're scared to speak up. And you empower their voice when you speak up too. So speak up, get involved, and you have the ability to do things. Really, I'm just some guy. Okay, yeah, I'm a doctor and I'm an engineer. Like, really, I'm just a human with, like, you know, 2 hands, 2 feet, and a heart and a mouth and a brain, just like you guys. And we need you all involved. And if you're here, obviously you care about health, you care about humanity, you care about other people, and you are the people that are called to help on this issue, guys.
Yes.
So thank you for having me.
Thank
Very
you
nice.
so much.
What area are you from, doctor?
I'm in Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay. Oh, that's where my brother-in-law lives. Okay. Well, we actually live in South Carolina, also in a very rural area. There's no internet connection out there. I can barely make a phone call.
Wonderful.
So I think I'm very happy about that now, listening to this tonight.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay.
Thank you, Dr.
Great to
Benulis.
see
Thank you.
everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
My dog
Thank
really
you,
wants-
Karen.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you
Thank you,
again. And also, I wanted to let everybody know we have another speaker for next week. Be a very different talk than this, but also on EMFs. Any of you who are interested also, I am doing my next 5-week plant-based and raw food coaching and recipe course. So if you want to get an abundance of recipes, many of them for the holidays, be part of that community, preparing food in my kitchen. We start Tuesday, November 17th for 5 Tuesday evenings on Zoom online. And yeah, so I look forward to seeing you next week. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And great seeing you this evening.
Karen, thank you.
Thank you, Karen, for bringing on Dr. Benulis.
Good night, everybody.
Karen,
You're welcome. Yes?
Karen, I refer somebody to you for the 5-week program. So give me a call tomorrow so I can give you her phone number.
Okay, sure.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Night, everybody.
Night.